Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Vajrakacharya Ashtotar Tata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padvajrakacharya Ashtotar Tata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Chikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktabinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Shyamakund Varakund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. So 16. 316. Okay. All righty. Let me get myself together here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 5th day of May, 2025 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're in chapter 3 entitled Karma Yoga, text number 16. Evam pravartitam chakram Nanuvartayati yaha Agayurindriyaramo Moghang Partha Sajivati Evam Pavartitang Chakram Nanuvartayati Yaha Agayurindriyaramo Moghang Partha Sajivati Evam Pavartitang Chakram Nanuvartayati Yaha Agayurindriyaramo Moghang Partha Sajivati Evam Pavartitam Chakram Nanuvartayati Yaha Gayorindriyaramo Moghang Partha Sajivati Evam Pavartitam Chakram Nanuvartayati Yaha Agayurindriyaramo Moghang Partha Sajivati Evam Pravartitam Chakram Nanuvartayati Yaha Agayurindriyaramo Moghang Partha Sajivati. Anyone online? Guess not.
Evam pravartitam chakram
Evam Pravartitam Chakram
Nanuvartayati yaha
Nanuvartayati Yaha
Agayurindriyo ramo
Agayurindriyaramo
Mogham partha sajivati
Moghang Partha Sajivati
Evam pravartitam chakram
Evam Pravartitam Chakram
Nanuvartayati ya
Nanuvartayati Hayaya
Agayurindriyarama
Agayurindriyaramo
Mogham partha sajivati.
Moghang Partha Sajivati. Evam, thus, Pravartitam, established by the Vedas, Chakram, cycle, na, does not, Anuvartayati, adopt, iha, in this life, yaha, one who, aga ayuhu, whose life is full of sins, indriya aramaha, satisfied in sense gratification, mogham, uselessly, partha, O son of Pritha, Arjun, saha, he, jivati, lives. My dear Arjun, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice thus established by the Vedas certainly leads a life full of sin. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. So let's just review that cycle before we go read the purport here. Okay. Text 14, all living bodies subsist on food grains which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna or sacrifice, and yajna is born of prescribed duties. Regulated activities are prescribed in the Vedas, and the Vedas are directly manifested from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, the all-pervading transcendence is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. And then this verse that we read today, my dear Arjun, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice thus established by the Vedas certainly leads a life full of sin, living only for the satisfaction of the senses. Such a person lives in vain. Purport. The Mammonist philosophy of work very hard and enjoy sense gratification is condemned herein by the Lord. Therefore, for those who want to enjoy this material world, the above-mentioned cycle of performing yajnas is absolutely necessary. One who does not follow such regulations is living a very risky life, being condemned more and more. By nature's law, this human form of life is specifically meant for self-realization in either of the three ways, namely karma yoga, jnana yoga, or bhakti yoga. There is no necessity of rigidly following the performances of the prescribed yajnas for the transcendentalists, who are above vice and virtue. But those who are engaged in sense gratification require purification by the above-mentioned cycle of yajna performances. There are different kinds of activities. Those who are not Krishna conscious are certainly engaged in sensory consciousness. Therefore, they need to execute pious work. The yajna system is planned in such a way that sensory conscious persons may satisfy their desires without becoming entangled in the reaction of sense gratificatory work. The prosperity of the world depends not on our own efforts, but on the background arrangement of the Supreme Lord, directly carried out by the demigods. Therefore, the yajnas are directly aimed at the particular demigods mentioned in the Vedas. Indirectly, it is the practice of Krishna consciousness, because when one masters the performance of yajnas, one is sure to become Krishna conscious. But if, by performing yajnas, one does not become Krishna conscious, such principles are counted as only moral codes. One should not, therefore, limit his progress only to the point of moral codes, but should transcend them to attain Krishna consciousness. Om jnana timirandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshur unmilitam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So somehow I was thinking of the Govardhan pastime when I was reading this. Govardhan, you may recall that Krishna interrupted the preparations for the Indra Yajna that his father and the other senior members of the community were preparing, as they had done many years before, even before Krishna was appeared or born. And it seemed to be the proper thing to do, because after all, they're an agricultural community, they're depending on the rains, as we read here, Anadbhavanti Bhutani Parjanarana Sambhava, that food grains grow and they present on the rains come when you perform sacrifice, and therefore sacrifice is necessary for survival. That's the idea. That was what Nanda Maharaj is more or less telling Krishna, that this is a traditional sacrifice, but it's aimed at pleasing the god of rain, Indra, so that we can, and it's a cycle. You sacrifice for the demigods or for Indra specifically, and the rains come, and then you produce all the grain, and the cows are fed, they produce the ghee, then you can produce more sacrifice, and this way prosperity can reign. But you see, in that cycle, there's no overt mention of Krishna, of God. I guess the implication is that you understand that the gods can give their largesse only because of Krishna, that they're getting the permission from Krishna. But that's not explicit, and therefore the whole Karmakanda section of the Vedas, which gives you details on these different sacrifices for different demigods, is more or less set aside in this Bhagavad Gita. You see, Krishna says, Trigunya Vishaya Veda, and this Trigunya Bhavarjana. Mostly these Vedas, the Karmakanda section, they're dealing with the three modes of nature. How you can live in the three modes of nature and prosper. But we don't want to live under the three modes of nature, because that's illusion. So that's why Krishna, he showed, I think, at the pastime, that you don't really need to worship Indra. Indra didn't agree with that, he caused havoc, but then he realized at the end that he made a big mistake. That's Indra for you. So, but here Krishna is saying, but if you don't at least, begin understanding there's higher powers that you have to please in order to prosper, then you're stuck in kind of an atheistic bind, and you're sure to become degraded. That's the thing. The demigod worship can be a first step in understanding Krishna, if you approach it rightly, if you can see from the point of the Bhagavad Gita. But ultimately, Krishna, in several places here, he says, no, kamais taistai rita jnana babanyate anyadevada. Those whose minds are bewildered, whose intelligence is taken away by material desires, worship the demigods for material things. And the best they can do, ultimately, is go up to heaven, right? So what does he say there? He says, yes, Detam bhuktva svarga logam vishalam chine punya martya logam vishati. That if you succeed in going up, you may enjoy for a long time, hundreds of thousands of years, extraordinary sense gratification, but you're using up your punya credits. And punya chine, when your punya becomes very skinny, in other words, it's finished. Martya lokam vishanti. You return to this world of, threefold, the wonderful world, the world of death. Sorry. Therefore, and then the final verdict of that is, evam tetam bhuktva swaka lokam vishadam chine punye mancha lokam evam trahi dharmam, the three Vedas that deal with that, three divisions of Vedas. Evam trihidam upambana gatagatam kama labante. You just go and you come in the service of karma, and you end up in the same place. You haven't made any advancement toward Krishna. So therefore, no, don't worship the demigods. But here he's saying, okay, as opposed to not worshiping anyone, being just a stone cold atheist, it's better to recognize the demigods, because if you understand it through the Bhagavad Gita, the demigods are getting their powers from Krishna. So then, why should I worship demigods? Let me just worship Krishna directly. Prabhupada makes that statement somewhere here, So that's, but here karma yoga, the whole thing of the karma is the selfless service, to not be attached to the fruits of your activity. That's the binding force, and the more that you gather, the more you're attached. And then if it's lost, the more lamentation, right? So Brahma Bhuta person, nashochati nakangshati. The whole problem is you're lamenting what you lost, and you're hankering for what you don't have, and even if you get what you don't have, if you lose it, then it's more shochati. But if you can get the Brahma Bhuta, you see, and then you get beyond no more shochati kangshati, samak sarveshu bhuteshu, you see everyone equally, mad bhaktim lamatevara. You can come to the point of bhakti. So that's what's going on here. Okay, we'll go on 17. Yastvatna ratareva syan atmatriptas chamanavaha atmanyeva cha santushtas tassikayam navidyate. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, and I just want you to know that I was the one who capitalized that self, because we're not into taking pleasure in the self. The self, myself. And we see, and the very first sentence of the purport is why I did it, because he's talking about Krishna. You think I had to fight for that. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human body is one of self-realization and who is satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him there's no duty. No duty. Purport: a person who is fully Krishna conscious and is fully satisfied by his acts in Krishna consciousness no longer has any duty to perform. Due to his being Krishna conscious, all impiety within is instantly cleansed, an effect of many, many thousands of yoga performances. By such clearing of consciousness, one becomes fully confident of his eternal position in relationship with the Supreme. His duty thus becomes self-illuminated by the grace of the Lord, and therefore he no longer has any obligations to the Vedic injunctions. Such a Krishna-conscious person is no longer interested in material activities and no longer takes pleasure in material arrangements like wine, women, and similar infatuations. So it could be a little bit puzzling here. Such a person, right in the verse, has no duty to perform, and then here we're reading, his duty thus becomes self-illuminated. What's all that about? It's talking about material duty. In other words, duty in terms of, I got to worship this demigod now so that the rains will come, or so that I can go to heaven, so many duties. But when you accept duty in relation to Krishna, it soon becomes service. Duty is something that, okay, it's from a higher power, and I have to perform it. And if you don't agree that you have that duty, you can get into trouble. I remember back in the 60s when the draft was going on, and a good half of the guys who were turning 18 were hoping they wouldn't get drafted. How can I avoid the draft? Maybe I should go to Canada. There was a whole thing like doing that, And I was thank God I didn't carry through with this, but I was very impressed impressed and inspired by those brave young men who turned in their draft card and then got arrested. Went to jail, not to run to Canada. So I was thinking I was going to do that, but Krishna had other plans. And my father, he got me a 4F, which was like gold, diamonds. You know what it is, right? 4F is a medical discharge. They don't bother you anymore. This kid, he's not suited, So that was great. And anyway, then, I eventually got into Krishna consciousness, which was 1,000,000 times, 2,000,000 times better. But the point is that duty is something that's given to you from above. You have a duty to perform. It's often by society. You get married, and it's, you have a duty to support your wife and your children, and the wife has a duty to take care of the kids, So, but in Krishna consciousness, you're accepting duties in relation to to Krishna, to the spiritual master, and so forth. These are the authorities that you realize are most favorable. In other words, by serving them, you'll be most benefited. You'll change your character. You'll become purified. The purification is mentioned here. The heart becomes purified. Of what? Of these selfish desires. Of the latent ones from previous lives and new ones that you make. There's always some attraction that's pulling you. No matter what age there is. And often it becomes a negative thing. Is that if I could just get a safe place. That's all. That can also be a big attraction, and also a big maya. Says, okay, now I'm secure. I got everything done. But that's an illusion. You can't be secure like that. And also it cuts you off from all the other people who are insecure, and you're not helping them. You see, Krishna consciousness means to paradukkha dukhi, ultimately to see, because we see the equality of everyone. Samak sarveshu bhuteshu. You see. And if someone else is suffering, you see, this is a child of God also, then they can also become Krishna conscious and become transcendental. So let me help them. You see, that's the mood of a real Vaishnava. And we see it carried to the extreme. Vasudev Dutt, I think it was his name. He offered the Lord Chaitanya, just take everybody back to Godhead, and whatever sins they have, give them to me. I'll suffer forever, and they'll go back to Godhead, and that'll be my. And he meant it. And Lord Chaitanya embraced him, and he was crying, and he said, you don't have to do that. Don't worry about it. And just by Lord Chaitanya, being in the universe, he was benefiting everyone. So, this having no duty to perform, this is also mentioned about Krishna. Natasya karyam, the word karyam, right? What's the verse we read? This was it 17? Huh? 17. Yes, evasyad atmachittamanava tasya karyam nabhidyate. You see that? The last quarter of the verse. There's no duty to perform. So there's a verse about Krishna that says he has no duty. Natasya karyam karanam cha vidyate natatsamastya vidikasta dushyate padatsa shakti vivadai vashuyate swabhavaki bala kriyacha bala jnana kriyacha. So Krishna has no duty to perform. Now Prabhupada, there's a phrase in English called he doesn't have to do anything. So having to do something means someone's giving you a duty, right? I have to do it. I have to go to work. I have a duty to pay the rent. So you accept that duty, and then but that's a material duty. So, but it's something that you accept to get another result. You see? So here it says Krishna has no duty to perform. You see? And really what it means is that he doesn't have to do anything. When you realize that duty means something you have to do. Someone has given you an assignment and you accept the authority. But Krishna doesn't have that. Because everything is carried out, swabhavaki jnana bala kriyacha. Just by his intrinsic strength, his energies, and his knowledge, his desires are being fulfilled like that. He doesn't have to perform a duty to get some other power, you see. And that's... we don't have that power. So, but here it says that we just read, this person who takes pleasure in the self, the super self, Krishna, whose human life is one of self-realization. And that's why Prabhupada said a person who is fully Krishna conscious, fully satisfied by his act, no longer has any duty to perform. Meaning he doesn't have any material duty. In Krishna consciousness, you accept spiritual duties. Oh, it's my duty to clean the temple every day, or my duty to be on time for go to the artik and perform the artik. So you accept that as and higher authorities, Krishna and his representatives, and you know that duty is there for your ultimate benefit. That is going to benefit you in the greatest way possible, because it's all purifying. You're accepting a duty to perform selfless service. You're not getting paid. It's not your payment is in your increasing pleasure in being Krishna conscious, in becoming trained in order to take pleasure in Krishna's pleasure and pleasure in his devotees' pleasure. And since Krishna is Anandamaya Abhyasad, he's made of Ananda, then if you can dovetail your activities in giving him pleasure, then you'll also be able to come and dive into that ocean of Ananda. That's actually the science. And it works, even in a partial way. What is all this chanting? Why can you keep chanting and not get tired of it? Because the soul is not subject to fatigue or all of these different things. The soul is always there, and if you can link that soul up to the Supreme Soul through bhakti, then you can open the channel, where of this seemingly impossible mythical state of Satchidananda, eternity, knowledge, and bliss. You see. But you can see that's it's such a contrast with life on this plane. Eternity, knowledge, and bliss. I mean, I got some knowledge, but ultimate knowledge, infinite knowledge. And I get some bliss occasionally, little spots of bliss. You may call it bliss, happiness, no problem. Eternity, nothing's eternal around here. On the material plane, it just doesn't compute. And it doesn't compute. But that's who we are, and that's what our real nature is. And this wonderful process of bhakti helps us to move along that path to that realization. And according to our determination and our eagerness for it, we can make a quick advancement. So let's see what Krishna says. 18? Naivatasya kutenarto nakutene hakashchana nachasya sarva bhuteshu kaschid artha vipashrayah. A self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Purport: a self-realized man is no longer obliged to perform any prescribed duty, save and except activities in Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is not inactivity either, as will be explained in the following verses. A Krishna conscious man does not take shelter of any person, man or demigod. Whatever he does in Krishna consciousness is sufficient in the discharge of his obligation. So he doesn't have any material purpose to fulfill. That's the whole idea. He's not. When if your duty is to sweep the floor, there's no material reason why you're doing that. You're doing that to fulfill your obligation to the Guru and to Krishna, and for self-purification. That's the motive. There's always a motive. We want to try to come to the point of ahaitikiya pratayata, which is a nice phrase in chapter 2, text 7 of the first canto. What is real dharma? Ahaitikiya means without cause, but the implication is it means without material cause or motivation. We have a motivation, otherwise we wouldn't do anything. There's material motivation and there's spiritual motivation. So we want to make as much of our life activity with spiritual motivation. That's the idea. Because that doesn't produce attachment to the material world, it produces liberation from the material world and attachment to Krishna. We don't want to give up our attachment. We want to sublimate it. I love that word, sublimate. Make it sublime. So, self-realized person who is fully self-realized and God-realized, he doesn't have any material purpose to fulfill and discharge of his prescribed duties. You see, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Tasmad asakta satatam. Karyam karma samachara. Asakto yachadan karma. Padamapnoti purushaha. Now here's he summarizes. Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty. For by working without attachment, one attains the Supreme. Purport. The Supreme is the personality of Godhead for the devotees and liberation for the impersonalist. A person, therefore, acting for Krishna or in Krishna consciousness under proper guidance and without attachment to the result of the work, is certainly making progress toward the supreme goal of life. Arjuna is told that he should fight in the battle of Kurukshetra for the interest of Krishna, because Krishna wanted him to fight. To be a good man or a nonviolent man is a personal attachment, but to act on behalf of the Supreme is to act without attachment for the result. That is perfect action of the highest degree, recommended by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Vedic rituals, like prescribed sacrifices, are performed for purification of impious activities that were performed in the field of sense gratification. But action in Krishna consciousness is transcendental to the reactions of good or evil work. A Krishna conscious person has no attachment for the result, but acts on behalf of Krishna alone. He engages in all kinds of activities, but is completely non-attached. So many things happen auspiciously if you take up Krishna consciousness, which may not be your actual motive in doing it. Just like we have the, Prabhupada is saying here that action of Krishna is transcendental to the reactions of good or evil work. A Krishna consciousness has no attachment for the result, but acts on behalf of Krishna alone. Now, in the process of doing that, you're becoming more and more liberated from the bonds of this world. You see, in other words, that ultimate, motive of the impersonalist liberation is a byproduct of bhakti. This is a very important point. Bilba Mangal Thakur, near the end of his Krishna Karnamrita, has this seminal verse. He talks about this in a very dramatic way. Bhakti stvai chadatara bhagavan yadisyan daivena nakpalati divya kishora murti mukti swayam mukulitanjali sevate sman dharmartha kama kati yaksamitak pratiksha. Now, recall the four main goals, general goals of Vedic lifestyle. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha, right? So in this case, dharma refers to exactly what we've been reading about, these worshipping the demigods and doing it very nicely, so that one can get artha, money. And with artha, you can fulfill kama, you see? And so, and after doing that for some time, or maybe some lifetimes, you realize, well, this is not getting me anywhere. Let me try for mukti. You see? So I want my mukti. It's a personal desire. And then you can undergo all kinds of austerities and yoga and all kinds of things to try to become detached from the material world. Burn out the material desires. That's not our process, but it's a process. If that's all you want is mukti. And as Prahlad famously says, mostly these transcendentalists, they want their own mukti. Prayena deva munayo. He's speaking to Lord Nrsingadev. This is a prayer. Prayena deva, O Lord. Munayo svava mukti kama. Mukti kama. It's a type of kama. It's a type of material desire. And what do? Maunam charanti. They don't speak to anybody. Silence. Maunam. In fact, that's the root of the word muni. Muni maunam. And what do? Charanti vijane. They wander where there's no people. Way in the hills, the Himalayas, some cave somewhere, away from people. And therefore, obviously, naparartha nishta, they're not at all determined to help others, you see. So, Plaza, that's not me. I'm not going to do that. Naitan vihaya kripana. I can't give up these wretched souls, kripanas, who are completely immersed in material things and are suffering like anything. Vimamuksha eko, simply wanting my own single mukti. Why? He's speaking directly to Lord Nrsingadev. Nanyam tadasya shadanam brahmato nupashe. Because I see that those wandering in this material world have no other shelter but you. They don't know that, and I have to give them you, and that's why I have to keep preaching. This is the anthem of the preacher, So that's ultimately, is still a material desire. If that, so here in the verse by Bhava Mangal, he's saying, Bhaktis tvayi stiratada. One who is firmly fixed in your bhakti will get the fruit of that bhakti. Bhagavan. This is amazing. He can't see. He blinded himself. You know the story? I mean, it's kind of a hair-raising story. I'm not going to get into that. But anyway, he's blind. So he can't really see, but he's seeing Krishna all the time within his heart. Bhakti strihi stiratada Bhagavan yadi syad. If someone is fixed in your devotion properly, then they get the fruit of that. And what is that? Mukti? No. Bhagavan Daivena palati divya kishora murti. The vision of your beautiful adolescent form. That's the result. Forget about mukti. What about mukti? Mukti swayam muklitanjali sevate sman dharma takamagata yaksamatakpachi. Mukti is waiting by the door, nicely with the anjali mudra. These mudras are important. I'll tell you, when we were working on the Bhagavatam, we always come up, about the anjali, the prayerful thing. Mood and the mudra. So we were saying, well, this is contrasting to the standard, which is more like this. There's nothing in there to offer. It's like, can you give me what I need? Please give me my daily bread. Okay, But here, the devotee, in this case, it's mukti personified, has got the anjali. There's something in there, right? There could be a flower in there. Pushpanjali. We do it all the time. So, it's waiting to serve. She's waiting to serve by the door. In other words, mukti is already taken care of. And anything I need of dharma, artha, and kama, they're also there. We need a little, kama. We need, nice prasadam sometimes. We need some necessary. But it's not our prime. It's not a deal. It's not some kind of a material thing. So, what is the fruit? You remember, vision of your adolescent form. That far better than any dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So that's really and Prabhupada makes that point a lot, that a pure devotee, someone who's constantly thinking of Krishna, is already liberated. What does it mean to be liberated? It means that the attractions of this material world are no longer attractions for you. Remember this verse, Yamunacharya, it's twice in this book. I'm going to find both. I think we've read it once already. Yadavadi mama cheta Krishna pada vinde namanamana sadhaman yudyatam rantum asi tadavadivata nadi sangame sma yamani bhavati mukhavikaro sushtu nishti manancha. I'll spite upon it. Probably I love that. He says, spite upon it. So Yamunacharya is saying, ever since I've been enjoying moment to moment the rasa of serving the lotus feet of Nandanandana, Chaita Krishna Pada Vinde, lotus feet. Nava, and ever fresh. Nava Sadhaman Yudyatam Rantum Asid. Then whenever I think of those experiences, because I told you the story, how we had a kingdom for a while, and the kings, they have harems, and what goes on with the harems. So he says, whenever that comes to my mind, I just twist my mind, I just spit at the thought. In other words, it's not just that he's not attracted anymore, he's absolutely repulsed from that. Just like meat eating, It's so ironic in one sense. I've lived in the apartment I'm in for like 25 years now. And all that time, right across the street, there's a McDonald's. And as sure as the sun rises at a certain time in the morning, there's a line coming in, the guys picking up their breakfast on the way to work, whatever, And there couldn't be less desire that I have to go over there and what do they got on the menu, But I told you that when way back in the early 60s, when I was part of a bowling team or something, and we would go once a week, and they opened up the first McDonald's. I mean, it was just getting going at that time, and suddenly, we can have nice, cheeseburger and fries, take it to the bowling alley. So there was a desire, but that desire is completely gone. It's completely cleansed, and it's more than that. It's almost like I'm seeing people, making the, ensuring their path to hell. This is horrible. I mean, so many, you come across Prabhupada's books, you read, first canto's full of it. Prabhupada is saying, as long as there is this mass slaughter of cows, there's going to be wars, And you can see that, I mean, in my 77 years, most of, a good part of the time, ever since I was 8 years old, I've been aware of politics. And believe it or not, we used to get the New York Times every day. And from when I could read, maybe when I was 10, 11, 12, I'm reading this Times every day, And there's always some war or war threatening. Vietnam went on for 10 years or more. And there's still wars going on, and threatening wars. I mean, if India and Pakistan do what they can do, which is have a nuclear war, we're finished. And the nuclear winter will come, just for those two throwing up all the nuclear bombs they have. So we're all on a knife edge here. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare. We got to chant. So, 20, okay. Karmanaiva hi samsiddhim astita janakariyaha lokasangaham evapi sampashyan kartum arhasi. Kings such as Janaka, Sita's mother, it's appropriate, it's her parents' day today, I think. Kings such as Janaka attained perfection solely by performance of prescribed duties. Therefore, just for the sake of educating the people in general, you should perform your work. Purport: kings like Janaka were all self-realized souls. Consequently, they had no obligation to perform the prescribed duties in the Vedas. Nonetheless, they performed all prescribed activities just to set examples for the people in general. Janaka was the father of Sita and father-in-law of Lord Sri Ram. Being a great devotee of the Lord, he was transcendentally situated. But because he was the king of Mithila, a subdivision of Bihar province in India, he had to teach his subjects how to perform prescribed duties. Lord Krishna and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal friend, had no need to fight in the battle of Kurukshetra. But they fought to teach people in general that violence is also necessary in a situation where good arguments fail. Before the battle of Kurukshetra, every effort was made to avoid the war, even by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but the other party was determined to fight. So for such a right cause, there is a necessity for fighting. Although one who is situated in Krishna consciousness may not have any interest in the world, he still works to teach the public how to live and how to act. Experienced persons in Krishna consciousness can act in such a way that others will follow, and this is explained in the following verse. All right, so I will read the following verse because they go together. Yadyadatadati shreshtas tattadeve tarojanaha sayat pramanam kurute lokas tarunavartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. People in general always require a leader who can teach the public by practical behavior. A leader cannot teach the public to stop smoking if he himself smokes. Lord Chaitanya said that a teacher should behave properly before he begins teaching. One who teaches in that way is called an acharya, or the ideal teacher. Therefore, a teacher must follow the principles of Shastra, or scripture, to teach the common man. The teacher cannot manufacture rules against the principles of revealed scriptures. The revealed scriptures, like the Manu Samhita and similar others, are considered the standard books to be followed by human society. Thus, the leader's teaching should be based on the principles of such standard Shastras. One who desires to improve himself must follow the standard rules as they are practiced by the great teachers. The Srimad Bhagavatam also affirms that one should follow in the footsteps of great devotees, and that is the way of progress on the path of spiritual realization. The king or the executive head of the state, the father and the school teacher are all considered to be natural leaders of the innocent people in general. Excuse me. All such natural leaders have a great responsibility to their dependents. Therefore, they must be conversant with the standard books of moral and spiritual codes. So this is a theme in the Bhagavad Gita and throughout all our books, is that when you take up Krishna consciousness, you suddenly have a much broader perspective of what your responsibility is, because we're recognizing ourselves as eternal souls who happen to be in an American body or whatever it is, female body at such age. But we're taking our cue from the acharyas. The acharyas means those who are literally setting the example. Acharya is a behavior. It's like these three things. They know the scripture, they live by the scripture, and they try to teach others to follow the scripture. So that living by the scripture is the essential element, obviously. And that's why this verse, Yadiracharati Shreshtas Tadevetrodana, whatever example the acharya sets by, serves as evidence, pramanam, example by which everyone else can follow. And we see that even in ordinary politics and everything. If you find, the leader, someone who's got political authority, whether it's a state or the whole country or something, if that person is a rogue and a rascal, that's a tremendously bad thing for the country, because then people will tend to say, well, he's doing it, why can't I do it? Conversely, you see, like with Ramchandra, the thing of his exiling Sita is like such a painful thing for everybody. But you realize he did it because of the position he was in, and he had to set an example, as painful as it is. So that's the importance of the acharya. When you find someone who's really ideal and spiritually realized and is real acharya, then that's the person who you should take shelter of, take instruction from. Just like we're reading Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, we're not reading in any other Bhagavad Gita. Because Prabhupada showed by his life, by his activities, that he was living all of these instructions. And that's why it has such a revolutionary effect from someone who actually accepts it and tries to live according to it. Whereas some other Bhagavad Gita, that famous story I think we heard recently in class, where Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was speaking to some professor who had teaching Bhagavad Gita in college or something like that. So Tamal says, have you read the Bhagavad Gita? Of course I read the Bhagavad Gita. And did you understand? Of course I understand it. So then what are you going to do? What do you mean, what am I going to do? In other words, he knew it as whatever, he had placed it in some context of ancient, Sanskrit literature that was very influential and reveals a lot of the principles, this and that. But he didn't see it related to him. Sarva Dharma Padacharya, when Krishna says that, he's speaking to all the readers, he's not just speaking to Arjuna. You should surrender. So this is why Prabhupada would heavily criticize, even from the beginning of this book. You read the preface and you say, one lady asked me what Gita I should read, because he didn't have any published Gitas when he first came, And he said, I didn't know what to tell her. There's all these Gitas, they're not going to help her because they're written by non-devotees and they're distorting everything, I read one who was like this thin. It was just the translations, It was the Penguin Gita. It was around, I think. And at the end of it, I didn't know, what am I going to do? I had no idea. It's just another far-out book that I read. But if you read the Bhagavad Gita, there's no question, you're getting struck. It challenges you, and it's and more than that, if you're actually following, it gives you substance by which you can try to reach others. Like that dehinos minyata dehi. Practically anyone can realize that they've been changing their body even in this one lifetime. So we're already transmigrating. And then you can use material evidence. There's actually evidence for the reality of reincarnation. That these little kids remembering their past lives, and when you check it out, it's true. There's such a thing like that. And this whole near-death experience thing, where people leave their bodies for some time during an operation and return. There's no question that we're not the body, and that we live again. Okay, so any questions, comments, arguments, doubts? All right, let's do one more. This is that verse that I start. Natasikaryam is there in the next purport. Name partasti kartavyam Trishulokeshu kinchana nanavaptam avaptavyam Varta eva chakarmani. O son of Pritha, there is no work prescribed for me within all the three planetary systems, nor am I in want of anything, nor have I need to obtain anything, and yet I am engaged in prescribed duties. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is described in the Vedic literatures as follows. Tamishwaranam padamam maheshwaram tam devatanam padamam chadaivatam patim patinam padamam parastad vidama devam bhuvanesham idyam. Then here's the verse is always quoted. Tatasya karyam karanam cha vidyate tatatsamastyam hyatikascha drishyate padasya shakti vibhadhaiva shruyate swabhaviki kanabala kriyacha. The Supreme Lord is the controller of all other controllers, and He is the greatest of all the diverse planetary leaders. Everyone is under His control. All entities are delegated with particular power only by the Supreme Lord. They are not supreme themselves. He is also worshipable by all the demigods and is the supreme director of all directors. Therefore, He is transcendental to all kinds of material leaders and controllers and is worshipable by all. There is no one greater than Him, and He is the supreme cause of all causes. He does not possess a bodily form like that of an ordinary living entity. There is no difference between His body and His soul. He is absolute. All His senses are transcendental. Any one of His senses can perform the action of any other sense. Therefore, no one is greater than Him or equal to Him. His potencies are multifarious, and thus His deeds are automatically performed as a natural sequence. Shvetashvara Upanishad 6, 7, and 8. Since everything is in full opulence in the personality of Godhead and is existing in full truth, there is no duty for the Supreme Personality of Godhead to perform. One who must receive the results of work has some designated duty, but one who has nothing to achieve within the three planetary systems certainly has no duty. And yet, Lord Krishna is engaged on the battlefield of Kurukshetra as the leader of the Kshatriyas, because the Kshatriyas are duty-bound to give protection to the distressed. Although He, the Lord, is above all the regulations of the revealed scriptures, He does not do anything that violates the revealed scriptures. So it's interesting here, because Prabhupada, when he quotes this verse, and he would always quote the second one, he would say, the Lord doesn't have anything to do. What he means is, because the language is the second language, He doesn't have to do anything. You see the difference? Have to do anything means you have a duty, you have an obligation. He doesn't have to do anything for everything to get to work, the whole universe to work. They're all simply working by His automatic energies and His expansions, right? He doesn't have to do anything. But He has so many things to do on Goloka Vrindavan. He goes out with the boys and the cows, meets the gopis, everything. So that's these verses here. So, but He still, acts responsibly because everyone's looking to Him as an example. There's that element, And that's there also, especially in great kings like Yudhishthir and Ram, and even though he didn't have to, take serious that criticism from the citizen who was saying, "Oh, you took Sita back," but she was kidnapped by Ravana. Actually, she wasn't. There was a false Sita, but aside from that, so in order to maintain his position, he exiled her. All right, we have time for one quick poem. Ready? This one you haven't heard in a while. Vidachay mai dandam dina bando dayang bang katadihana babotta kachadanya mamasti nipatata koti nimalang vang the bangbas tatapi kilapi horak stuyate chatakena. The Chataka subsists on rain it catches in midair, and so it's always praying to the cloud to send its fare. Yet though that cloud may send a thunderbolt instead of rain, that bird continues praying fervently despite the pain. Just like the Chataka, I fix my mind upon one goal, and that is you, O Lord, most kind to every fallen soul. So whether it is punishment you send or mercy sweet, I'll always pray to you for service to your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.